So with that, I think, the flow of the events has been pretty well structured. In the previous sessions, we had the panelists talk about scope 3. And we are actually going to talk about MSMEs. This is where, in scope 3 is where all the MSMEs sit, right? We do an index with SIDBI called the Sustainability Perception Index. So how aware are MSMEs? And we were talking earlier, and we find that awareness at the grassroots level, though we think everybody knows, they don't. So the first is the lack of awareness. Though we have seen over the last 2.5 years, the awareness has increased. If the awareness has increased, the ability to implement has always been a challenge. It could be the mindset, it could be the capital required, etc. So, we are going to get a good set of insights here. We have a pretty diverse panel. And let me start here first with Mahesh on, you've looked at ESG for many years now. How do you look at the net zero target? How do you see it evolving?
ESG, governance, our group has always maintained high standards, ethics, accountability and compliances, and we are more cautious on it. Social, diversity, education, health, through CSR, we are working on it. Now, I'll come to the net zero. I would like all of you to take back something today. Being from automotive background, having developed engines and studied their behavior, carbon and nitrogen are there in the fuel, and they are oxidized in the engine, and they become COs, NO, CO2, NO2. CO2, NO2 are okay. CO and NO are dangerous. They come out when the fuel is unburnt. जब आप accelerate करते हैं, तो you are putting in a rich mixture, and unburnt fuel is coming out. That is dangerous, and NO is coming out, CO is coming out, and when you apply brakes, तो जितना fuel उसमें है, वो सब waste जाता है. तो आज से आप भी you can do more kilometers per liter by reducing this, and this can be done by keeping distance from the vehicle in front. Now, CO becomes CO2 and NO becomes NO2. This was the earlier years, this thing, but now today, CO2 itself is increasing in percentage and making it difficult for us to breathe. In industry, from the fossil fuels, generators, other processes, and even chemicals, they all come in, and they all are affecting this environment. So all these need to be reduced, which we are reducing over a period of time. And CO2 percentage we are trying to control, or everybody can try to control, by planting more and more trees which absorb CO2 and emit oxygen, so that this balance is maintained for our health also. Chemicals, effluent treatment plants, gases, you have to disintegrate them and make them filter through so that they are more clear. And energy consumption, wherever it is being generated, is causing that. So we move more on to wind and solar, and as a country to the hydro plants. So that will all help us out. And this we are working on balancing CO2 and O2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahesh. Suparna, moving to you at Schneider, right? I know I think emphasis is a lot on E in most of the discussions that we have, but without governance, it doesn't work. So I know you've recently also won some award on corporate governance. How does that fit into your entire ESG view?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and I'll present my views, which are probably, coming from a CFO's lens, and also proud to state that Schneider has been recognized as the world's most sustainable company even this year, twice in a row. And we are very, very focused on the ESG initiatives as an organization. But now coming back to the governance, and this probably holds pretty well to the CFO CFO's roles and responsibilities. See, overall, ESG is, it's not only about actions, it's also about the outcomes and recording those outcomes and how it is presented in terms of the various reporting structures, the various corporate governance frameworks, or the ESG frameworks that we all are into. And governance there probably plays a very, very important role because ultimately whatever is being done has to be recorded and reported through the governance framework. So and governance is just not what you're doing for the environment or what you're doing socially. It's an overall, it's an overall philosophy of the company as to what all we are doing. And it doesn't, as I said, it's just not about the environment or social responsibilities. It's also about having ethical business practices, having good accounting and reporting structure, good compensation levels, having a diverse workforce, a diverse board, a good composition of the board, and ultimately the way we conduct, and especially maybe I'll say for listed companies, the way we conduct ourselves to hold on to our reputation and build confidence ultimately in the eyes of the customers, the customers of course, the investors, the regulators and all the stakeholders as we come along. So governance for me is again extremely important because that is the end result of whatever actions we do, what is reported and what is ultimately seen as the report card of the organization. And that's why, and especially from a CFO's lens, that's one of our key responsibilities in assuring the sustainability of the organization. It's not the environment sustainability, but in terms of everything, the profitability, the cash flow, the kind of future, our own product development, R&Ds, etc. So everything kind of comes and, percolates down to the governance practices of the organization.
Thanks, Suparna. Moving to Saket. Saket, now coming to MSMEs finally, right? MSMEs are at a crossroad because at one level, sometimes sitting in the supply chain, the larger ones expect them to be more ESG compliant, but it also comes at a cost. So, and there are different stakeholders involved. Sometimes it could be the government needs to do something. Sometimes it could be the large OEM that needs to do something. So in your views, what can be done to build a more robust system for the MSMEs to adopt ESG?
Hi, thank you for having me here. So in the last 25 years of my career, I have worked across sectors, metals, mining, cement, chemicals, and now power is a very large part of our portfolio over here. I think so one thing is, most of us, we don't know too much about MSMEs. So let me just give you a little bit of insight. I think so MSMEs are the lifeblood of the economies globally. And they're not only, engines of economic growth and innovation, but also the amount of employment they give. So in terms of the business, 90% of the business globally is done by MSMEs. In terms of the employment, they contribute roughly 60% of the global employment, depending on which nation you're talking about. And on the GDP, roughly 30%, something like India, and somewhere for China, it would be as high as 60% of the GDP is contributed by the MSMEs. So the Indian MSMEs have done very well in the last 10 years. In terms of the GDP, they are 30%. In terms of the employment, I have already told the number, but also external facing, the amount of exports what the MSMEs are doing, it has tripled in the last 4-5 years. Today, MSMEs are exporting more than $140 billion of goods and services. And the other important part is that if we have to think from the longer term perspective, we are talking about a Viksit Bharat of 2047, and we are talking of attaining climate goals and target by 2030 and 70. MSMEs have to be a part of this journey. And depending on the complexity or depending on which sector we are talking about, because I have looked at chemicals, I have looked at textile, I think the maturity of the MSMEs is very different. And when I say that, it could take 1 year to 5 years to 7 years, depending on which sector are we talking about. So now coming to what complexities MSMEs they face. The biggest complexity MSMEs they face is what we define as sustainability and ESG. It's very difficult to convince them, or it's very difficult to have a very good know-how. They have a thin understanding of it. The second thing is, in terms of the cost of doing business is very important. Any additional cost in terms of compliance, they take a step back. The third is in terms of bank finance. MSMEs, the SIDBI and the NABARD and the financial institutions, they have done very good work. MSMEs today, roughly $400 billion of exposure the banks they have for MSMEs, and this number has been expanding by 10-15% kind of a number on a yearly basis. And on the delinquencies, is the lowest delinquencies what we are seeing on the MSME side. So I think so. It's now the government of India which has to step up. And I think so in an earlier panel I heard someone saying BRSR adoption and some version. I think that is a good step. But one thing is there has to be a roadmap for MSMEs from a longer term perspective so that they don't get confused. Because they are very small entities. Second thing is in terms of bank financing. The bank financing today I am aware about. Companies in Korea, in Indonesia, in Germany, and multiple nations where there is a lot of financing which happens. And financing is a very important part of for MSMEs. Why it's important? Because at the end of the day, one, they want to expand their operation, and second thing is they need working capital. So it has to be low cost of capital. The third part is the innovation part. I think so. One thing we as a nation, the way we think on the R&D and innovation, some of the large companies also they make it. They talk about the innovation R&D, but the amount of money spent is very less. So on the MSME part, I think so there has to be a decent amount of innovation R&D which has to happen. They can tie up with there are a lot of technical institutions which can be done. And the fourth part I would say is on the assurance and a platform. I think so something very cheap has to be offered for them. So I think that will solve a good amount of MSME puzzle. And let me tell you, I have looked at companies in Korea, Indonesia, China. MSME sector is fully, I think so they have done an excellent job in last 3-4 years. There is a decent amount of money which is being lent by the banks and very small ticket sizes. So what really happens is from the longer term perspective, your business imperative is kind of maintained. Thank you.
Thanks, Saket. You talked about innovation, and let me take that part forward. I think for the MSMEs to also realize, right, it's a mindset shift that ESG is not only about risk or cost, it's about growth and innovation and competitive examples. And I think there also the large companies have a large role to play. So in your mind, how do you look at ESG being a driver for innovation, competitive advantage? And let me pose this first question to Suparna. Sorry,
Sudipta. All right. Thank you so much, and thank you to all for being so patient with us. We are just right at the crisp of having lunch, and I'll take just a minute and a half. Right, not too much of conversation on that. So, in my mind, I believe that since the time ESG has come into the entire ecosystem of business, things have been amazingly active. I would say that this is like the innovation of, let's say, what cloud used to be to the businesses in the early 2000s, right? That brought about so many opportunities. And similarly, this is another aspect that is bringing in a lot of innovation. In my mind, I believe what is happening is that the large companies, and I'll give an example of HCL Tech. Large companies are doing tremendous work in helping organizations, MSMEs, to drive product innovation at scale. Because if you let if you think about the MSMEs trying to do it all by their own, so that becomes a challenge, right? I mean, where do you find the funds? Where do you find the platforms? Where do you find the XYZs that are required for it? And in that time comes organizations which already are working on some seed platforms that they have, platforms where they have, kind of onboarded their clients, their customers across the various, I would say, the size and the sectors. So it is becoming much more easier for them to be able to drive that innovation in the MSMEs. And why would they do that, you say, right? Because there is a very strong aspect of the S that the corporates, the large corporates are driving, and helping the MSMEs, that I think is one of the key factors why they would help them, right? The other thing that is happening is that the reduction in operational risk and the cost is getting fueled by this kind of a conversation that we are having in terms of the ESG for the MSMEs. Why risk? Because, you know, I mean, let me take an example of, let's say, a handicraft. A decent sized handicraft organization. Now, if the market for them is Europe, right? You know that the taxonomies in Europe are very, very stringent, right? So how can this particular shop floor or the organization, the MSME out front, can make itself risk compliant? I mean, like, you know, try to avoid the risks that are involved in shipping that particular product to Europe, because at the end of the day, whoever is buying the product in Europe, let's say it's another large conglomerate who buys from 500 different suppliers, and it's a big conglomerate, right? For them, that particular one in India, the shop floor that's supplying to them, becomes a scope 3. So obviously, it's a very, very important aspect of organizations, the large organization. And let me again take an example of HCL Tech. We have something called as Project Samudaya, right? Where what we are doing is we are across Uttar Pradesh and I believe in Tamil Nadu. We reach out to villages. And this is not CSR, guys. This is beyond CSR, right? This is a business model that we work on. We reach out to organizations, find markets for them, let them leverage our technology, onboard them on our technology, make them compliant, and open newer markets for these small organizations, small scale industries. The other important thing is, you know, the way we are driving, I would say, the innovation for our customers, right? That is also there. And when I say customers, please don't be fooled by thinking that, oh, you know, the big customers, the Fortune 500s and their 1,000s and all of that. But when we are talking about customers, it can be, I'll give you a live example. We are working in Malaysia, right? There is a conglomerate of palm production conglomerate who gets their supplies from smaller, I would say, agricultural outfits, right? So what we are doing is that other than making that the large organization in Malaysia risk compliant, innovating for them, we said that can we also, my dear customer, can we also work for your scope 3 suppliers, which means that the small enterprises, the smaller agricultural enterprises, can we do something for them? And we said we'll do it as a POC, and if this works, well, we are then going to roll it out to others as well, and then we'll charge a premium. What it helps in doing is that this gives us an opportunity to do a lot of test cases, a lot of implementing innovation at scale, and then implementing it across. So that also gives us I would say, a controlled environment to identify and implement technology, and driving the benefits for innovation for the MSMEs. Yeah.
Thanks, Sudipta. Moving on to Ashutosh, what are your views again on innovation and competitive advantage?
So when you talk, so when you say about the innovation and competitive advantage, I will figure out it in 3 buckets, and the first one is within the organization, second value chain partners, And third, something which is beyond the organization, neither value chain partners nor us, but something for the good for the society, community, and brand building exercise. So first, the value chain partners. So we as a company, FMCG company, we buy a lot of raw materials and packing materials. Raw materials are basically intended for use, so there is no recycle, reuses, or compostable thing. So it is non-recyclable. But in the packing material case, we get lot of innovation with the help of our MSME vendors, whereby currently we are having approx 20% of the material that is recycled, reused, and taking into consideration the FSC part, then it gives a sustainability procurement of approx 30% leverage. We have a target of 80% recycled, reused, or compostable packaging material by 2030. So currently we are at 20%, and in next 5 years we have to leapfrog from 20% level to the 80% level. That's a big challenge we have taken. So coming to the raw material case, so in case of raw materials, we have 100% sustainably sourced one of the highly critical endangered, not only one, but a few of the highly endangered critical herbs through cultivation, contract farming. As per the IUCN, IUCN means that is the International Union for the Conservation of the Natural Resources, and they have declared it has to be the on the verge of the extinction. So Dabur did some exercise, though our requirement is very less for those herbs, so it is limited to the quantity of 20 metric tons, but it accounts to the, if we talk in the terms of the acreage, it accounts to approx 400 acres. And these are some of the endangered species which are found in the upper Himalayan ranges, or some of the means deep inside the forest. So we have taken up the exercise. It's very tough, and the extinction has been managed, and we are 100% risk. We have mitigated the risk through our MSME vendors, and that's the innovation. And this has not only brought a benefit to the Dabur India Limited, but it's a biodiversity benefit that is to the country and to the entire nation, in fact, into the entire global society. And then when I say this is a few example within the organization with respect to the value chain partners. Coming to the operation parts, which is done by our own company. So if I say for the operations part, then we as a Dabur company are pioneer as in the FMCG industry for 100% elimination of the coal usage. So we are 100% coal usage free, and there is zero emission from the coal. So this has been done with the help of our MSME vendors, and it has given advantage of the cost also. So in place of coal, we are using the biomass, biobriquettes, which are quite competitive. So next to this, I will include the social part, which is not particularly through the MSME vendors, but when I am talking of the operations, then there are few of the lines in our Baddi and Indore factory. Indore is one of the estate unit and estate manufacturing unit. Their 100% line is being managed by the women power. So right from the worker level till the manager level, everything is managed by the women power. We have a mandate of 20% by 2028. Currently, we are to the tune of 13% in managerial roles across the organization. But these two units are being, specific lines are being 100% being managed by the women power. And we have sensed a productivity increase of 10%. So the innovation within the organization through the value chain, we are getting the competitive. Third part, which I said that beyond the organization, that means that is neither within the operations part nor the value chain partner. Third, so we as a Dabur company are the pioneer in the FMCG industry for the first plastic positive company. So whatsoever we consume the plastic, we do more than that the recycling. Currently we are at the level of 105%, and this accounts to the 40,000 metric tons of plastic. So many of the MSME partners are engaged and who work round the clock gathering the plastic material and then recycling it. So that is something which Dabur is doing, and this is not only bolstering the consumer confidence but also giving an advantage to the investors and giving a goodwill to our company. So something in addition to this, I can say that we do lot of water conservation also, and that comes through some of the partners. And we did desert bloom. So we have a plant in Nevai, it is in Jaipur, near to Jaipur. So there we did a project called Desert Bloom, where we did the water conservation, rainwater harvesting, then the ponds, re-establishment of the ponds. And it was observed that there was an increase of the 10 feet in the water table. So that boosts the nearby availability of the water and to the farming community also. And they reap the advantage in terms of approx 20 to 30% in the production harvest. So this is something which we have done the innovations and reaping the advantage. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Moving to Venu, coming from NITI Aayog, right? What do you think are the challenges that the MSMEs face on ESG, and what kind of policy interventions would help?
Thank you very much. I think first thing, I think post-lunch sessions are daunting because you're half asleep, and this session especially, I'm the last man standing between you and lunch, is more daunting. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to basically build upon the points that my fellow panelists have made. I think one thing is that I think Saket ji has mentioned about lack of vision, high cost of capital, and third point in terms of lack of awareness, right? I think these are the three central points that have emerged from Saket ji's point in terms of challenges of MSME. So let me just talk about in terms of, because given that I have only three minutes for this session, let me talk about what NITI is doing rather than talking about the challenges. So we're doing three things primarily, right? In terms of what Saket ji said about there's a lack of vision. So NITI is in fact working on a long-term 2070 vision for the country. And the 2070 vision primarily entails into understanding how different sectors are going to be looking at 2070, what is the investment requirement that is going to coming up, how do we socially manage this whole transition process. So that's the first thing that NITI is trying to come up with. And we're also going to come up with a MSME specific vision as well, right? The second thing what government is doing, not other than just NITI, is that building a taxonomy framework. And within the taxonomy framework, if you actually read out the public document, there's a clear principle which talks about proportionality for MSMEs, right? So the taxonomy for MSMEs should be simple, targets much more lenient than for the large firms, and also much clearly measurable. So that's the second thing that we're talking about. In terms of, so as I started talking about the vision, then move to the next point about the cost of capital and the low awareness. And let me talk about both of them in a single measure in terms of how government is trying to address. In the recent past, you've seen probably the Ministry of Power, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency has implemented a scheme called as Aditi. If you have not heard of the scheme, please do read. What they've done under the scheme is that they're giving interest subvention for the micro, small, medium enterprises to implement energy efficiency technologies, including green technologies. An interest subvention going up to as high as 5% for micro, small, and 3% for medium enterprises. Second thing they're also doing is they're providing technical assistance for MSMEs to develop DPRs, given that these firms typically do not have capacities, and prepare, and also to set up MRV systems, right? Because you've been, and in the session before was talking about the importance of data, especially for talking about these metrics. So that particular scheme also tries to, primarily address almost 14 sectors to start with, and look at a cluster-based mode of approach for implementation, and address the challenges of cost of capital, awareness, and also the technical capacities, right? The third and the last point that I would just probably address and then conclude is that my fellow panelists also pointed out how MSMEs are changing the energy mix. Today, when in aggregate, if you look at the energy mix of MSMEs, 85% is thermal and 15% is electricity. So 85% of our MSMEs are, 85% of all the MSMEs are relying on coal primarily, which is problematic given that they want to move towards emission neutrality. So how do you diversify their how do you diversify this energy mix? So diversification towards green technologies would mean high capital, primarily because some of these technologies come with a high capital cost. So that's where I think we need to look at how do we look at business models primarily, where we have business models like RESCOs and ESCOs to primarily facilitate the capex investment, but at the same time help MSMEs to undertake the transition process. So NITI is also trying to work on with some partners to build pipeline of these projects which can be scaled across the country. So let me just stop here, I think, and probably we're at the limit of the time.
I'll just take a few more minutes and just run one set of questions with all the panel members and requesting all to keep it a little short. And let me again start with Sudipta here. You know, we've been talking about MSMEs and the supply chain, right? And what are you doing to support the MSMEs and the supply? What kind of tools do you think they require?
Sure. I briefly touched upon the things that we are doing as HCL Tech as a part of helping MSMEs in their journey towards ESG. I'll quickly also talk to you about a couple of technology solutions and how technology is helping them. First of all, that being a technology company, we have access to a lot of data platforms, a lot of technology that can automate. And when I say automate, please don't think that, oh my God, how can someone automate something that is such a manual process, right? Think of MSMEs, it's all manual, right? But there are a lot of ways in which we are helping automate the entire ecosystem for the MSMEs. And again, I'll take an example of agriculture, because that's the most difficult vertical to automate, especially in the small farmers and all. So that is one thing. The other one is what we do is, and we are starting it as a pilot, is that we are trying to bring the MSMEs that work with us, or we identify as such, and kind of create a synergy with our customers. Right, so that's something that we call relationship beyond the contract, which is something very famous about HCL. So it's not only that with our customers, the large customers, we provide what has been asked for in terms of technology, but we also identify that out of the MSMEs that are a part of the larger ecosystem and database of HCL across the projects that we do in the space of in ESG, how can we build a bridge so that the MSMEs can benefit, financially, economically, all of it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Moving on to Suparna. In your organization, right, again, ESG comes at a cost for the supply chain. How do you look at sort of reducing their challenges?
See, for us to be a forerunner in the sustainability journey, it's important that forward partners as well, the customers as well as, the backward, the vendor base, they also have to be a part of the sustainability journey. Now, there are various ways in which we can support an MSME, and especially because they are under extreme pressures of cost and, where to invest what. There's a resource crunch always. They're not sometimes very clear on where they have to go. So as larger entities of the ecosystem, what we can do is we can enter into long-term contracts with MSMEs, so that we have a 5-year contract with a commitment on what kind of purchases we'll do from them, and maybe an indicative price, which will give them the confidence to invest today and have a better tomorrow for them in terms of an assured revenue and assured ROI on the investments that they make. So this is one kind of help that larger companies can give to their vendor base, smaller MSME vendor base. The second thing is some guidelines or some advantages on the technology side. And when I say technology, like Sudipta talked about the software kind of technology, it's not only about the software, it's about using their product and enhancing the value of that product by using technology, which will eventually help in, say, in the product which I am making. So very quickly, the one is, of course, the financial assurance through long-term contracts and the technological assistance. These are the two things which I think can really help smaller MSMEs to actually come and do well in the sustainability, not only for themselves, also for their customers. So that would be my point.
Thanks, Suparna. Moving on to Mahesh,
We are trying to convince, as you said, that it is an awareness stage. by telling our employees, that's also important, and MSMEs, that if you breathe, eat, drink contaminated, unhygienic, or are surrounded by such environment, you fall sick. So to prevent that, we must take care of our environment. Thank you.
Venu, to you know, looking at climate, most of the GHG emission sort of lies with the scope 3, right? So any kind of policy intervention that is required to make sure that the MSMEs realize it and implement better things.
Yeah, I think NITI is, I think as briefly mentioned, we're going to come up with this 2070 vision. But apart from that, we're also working on something called as product carbon footprint. So what are the primarily, when you look at what is happening at the global developments, apart from CBAM, in EU there are a lot of regulations, especially on the product category rules. In terms of, you know, if you're consuming this water bottle today, what is the carbon footprint of this water bottle? Tomorrow, if this guy wants to ship this water bottle to Europe tomorrow, and if it doesn't satisfy the emission thresholds, then they will not accept it. So how do we enable such data ecosystem, you know, to which can capture that such kind of metrics primarily, and also understand what are the sectors to target with, you know, which are the important sectors to target with, which are the opportunity areas for India where India can take a, you know, big leapfrog. So this is something that we are working on at this moment. So I think in combination with the initiatives that I mentioned primarily, I think there's going to be I'm quite optimistic in terms of how MSMEs will be well prepared to navigate this transition story.
Thanks, Venu. Moving to Ashutosh. Ashutosh, BRSR core also talks about more equitable growth, inclusive growth. So on the supply chain, you know, what are you looking at more for the MSMEs?
So to tell you regarding first the numbers of the MSME, standalone India basis, we have approx 50% by value buying from the MSME vendors. And if we count it in the numbers, in the number terms, the base is approx 70% of our vendor base. So 70% of our vendors are MSME vendors and we are dependent on them. So one of the key challenges that vendor face, though we pay, is the financial issue. We pay them timely, but in spite of that, we have tied up and we have association with financial partners, that is trades, banks. So trades, we have association with M1 Exchange, C2 Trades, RXIL. Here, vendors are facilitated in terms of the timely payment. So you can say 4 or 5 days in advance of what is the payment terms. So if you count in a year the number of cycles, so if 5 days are saved in one time, so if he is doing a 7 cycles, so 35 days, that is more than a 1 month of saving. In addition to this, they get the opportunity of the discounting factor also. So the bills are presented to the exchanges and there they can have the early payment. So the cash flows and the financial issues are not a problem. They can leverage the market opportunity whereby they can gain in terms of the right costing and the right time buying, right time procurement, all these things. So in addition to the trades, we have tied up with the banks. To name HSBC, we have tied up for the agri-banking and the FPO, whereby they are facilitating our vendors for the working capital and the current needs. We have association with DBS Bank where they provide us the contract term capital for our yearly requirements, like we are a major player in the juices, where if I say the fruits, they are the seasonal commodity. So there the working capital is a major requirement. There the banks comes into play and they facilitate. So MSME players are facilitated in terms of the financial leverage. The second thing which many of us, and since morning I am listening also, is the awareness. So awareness and this capacity building is a major challenge with the MSME vendors. And we, to say DNB is supporting us, so they are providing awareness sessions to our vendors related to the ESG principles and the code of conduct, sourcing policies. We have preferential policy procurement also. All these things. In addition to this, the capacity building programs are conducted for the greenhouse gas emissions, energy factor, human compliances, policies. So all these factors, so this is not only an insight is provided to the vendors, but also how to measure the energy factor. So spreadsheets are provided to MSME vendor where they have just to put the numbers what they get in their bills. So automatically everything their energy factor will be computed, and that is facilitated hereby by the DNB. So we are providing the awareness, capacity building. Third thing is like we have got one association with self-help groups and community building programs also. So I will say we have partnered with Jivika, that is in the Bihar, that is a BRLPS, Bihar Rural Livelihood self-help group promotion, livelihood promotion societies. So there that is a tripartite agreement where we facilitate the vendors whatsoever the self-help groups and the aggregating vendors they aggregate through the group, that we buy in totality. So this is the third factor. In addition to this, we are going ahead with the traceability project also. So we are providing our MSME vendors for the honey. So the traceability, that is a one kind of innovation that we have done, that is giving a means right from the level this harvesting is captured from till our factory gate, all the value chain transitions are captured. So there is a this is a kind of blockchain where the complete insight of the material is captured, and this is not only giving a advantage to the consumer but also to the beekeepers, whereby we provide them weather forecasting also on the mobile application and the data of the crops also. So beekeeping is a migratory kind of thing. So when the beekeepers get these data on the weather and the crop, so he can take a calculated based decision where to migrate, so that he can get the right yield. So these are some of the challenges which vendors face, and we are enabling them.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Very, very interesting. Now ending with Saket, looking at the time again. Saket, your thoughts?
So, MSME space is something very interesting, I feel, because at the end of the day, I think so people, they don't know what the reality, what is happening. You have to visit a shop floor of China, Indonesia, or India to know what exactly is happening. I think so there's a lot of automation which is happening. A lot of my colleagues who go to China, they tell me that, the number of people what they see on the shop floor, it has been dwindling by 15-20% every year, and this is a reality what we have to face. But the most important part what we have is, India, we are blessed, we are a part of the larger value chain, whether you talk about chemicals, textiles and others. There are multiple examples. What we can do is, if suppose there's a large textile company in India, they operate out of, they have offices in Europe, US, they know what the standards are. And I have seen that in my previous organization also, we had this case whereby one of the large fashion vendors, they wanted to, they wanted some KPIs on the sustainability side attained by the company. So what we did was, we had a setup in the northern part of India. We said water is a big issue, let's reduce the water specific consumption. How do we do it? So what we did was, we did some investment on the plant and machine and all that, but not only, we supported the vendors also down the value chain. What we are seeing, it's absolutely possible for larger companies to really educate the value chain and also put the money where the investments can be made. I think it is possible. And largely in case of textile, chemicals, engineering, and couple of these sectors, India and a lot of large companies, they have an advantage. So it's absolutely possible. And Indian MSMEs, most of them are very well positioned. It's only about the money, it's about the technology, and it's about the innovation, what they have to keep pace with. Thank you.
Thank you. I think very well summarized also, Saket, from your side. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to all the panelists. I think we are from Dun & Bradstreet also working very closely with MSME as well, with the larger corporates, of course. Capacity building, as Ashutosh said, is a very key factor. We are doing it with the larger companies with their value chain, but we are doing it also with the MSMEs directly. The other challenge that we see is data collection. Data is not structured, technology can come in, but data is not clean. And ESG measurement is completely based on the data that we are collecting, monitoring, audit, etc. So we are also with the larger companies as well as with their supply chain, reaching out to the MSMEs directly to see how we can help them in the data collection. And I think both the large and small are in this together if we want India to be honestly net zero by 2070. And we were having a discussion before this, and I think all the panelists feel that India will meet the targets, and the companies have a more aggressive targets of 2030, 2040, and we have the panelists feeling very confident that they'll all meet the net zero target. So I think it's a pretty positive feel. With that, over to you. Thank you.